Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online episode review. This one's going to be for Season 1, Episode 2, Beater. And yeah, as I said in my last review, I think I'm going to have a lot more to say about the episodes going forward than I did about the first episode. And part of the reason for that is that one, this episode is pretty interesting just in terms of how it relates to the source material that it actually came from, because while the first episode comes directly from the Sword Art Online light novel number 1, Aincrad Volume 1, this one doesn't come from Volume 1, doesn't come from Volume 2, doesn't come from Volume 8, which has Aincrad stories. It actually comes from this book. It's Sword Art Online Progressive Volume 1, which is this this new series that the author of the original, Reiki Kawahara, wrote years after the original story, because obviously the idea is that Sword Art Online was written basically originally back in 2002. The author wrote it to enter this novel competition, but there was a page count limit, which is why that book, the original book, is the way it is, like skipping so much of the floors to focus primarily on the 74, 75 stuff. That basically is the end of the show. And then he went back and did other stuff. But in the afterword basically of this book, he really goes into depth in explaining about how I'd always wanted to cover much more of this Aincrad story, and now I can because I'm popular after Excel World and the success of Sword Art Online. And so this progressive series is about him deciding that, look, I'm going to go back to the start of the game, and I'm going to show you the important stuff that happened on the early floors as well. So this book basically starts from the beginning. You don't get the episode 1 content that is already in Aincrad Volume 1, but you do address some of the other stuff on Floor 1. You cover Floor 2 as well. Volume 2 of this series covers Floor 3, I think, in completion. Volume 3 covers Floor 4 in completion, and I think that's as far as he's up to with Progressive. But I just think it's really interesting the way the Sword Art Online source material relates to what is actually covered in the anime, and just the order of the way these stories actually came out. The other interesting thing here is that he basically admits that, look, because of how long ago I wrote the original, there are going to be some continuity errors here. Primarily just about how much time Asuna and Kirito spent together on the early floors. Like, this episode of the anime that I'm just about to get into reviewing basically shows Kirito and Asuna meeting for the first time at the first floor boss raid meeting. Whereas in this book, it actually starts off, like basically the first chapter, with the first meeting of Asuna and Kirito in the first floor labyrinth in the lead up to the boss battle, and then like their second or third meeting is actually the scene that happens in this episode of the anime. So he just basically like apologizes that, look, this is really going to be like the only main continuity error, that the two actually did spend a lot of time together on the early floors, and whatever kind of thing that meant he went off solo to do the other stories happened at a later point. But I'll address those as we come to them. What I like so much about this episode compared to the first episode is just that you really get to see the way the battles work in this world really well in the fight that happens here. You get a lot of the emotion that comes out in the fights as well, with the death of Diavel here, which, as I said in the last review, you don't really see a character die in the first episode to kind of get across this whole you die in the game, you die in real life thing. But that happens here, and the emotion is very real, even though Diavel isn't the most main character. He's important for this episode, and he dies here, but it's just like it's an impactful first death for sure. This episode is the introduction of Asuna into the series, which is really good. And then it's just, as well as that, just it's progress made in the clearing the game. You see a boss battle, and I think it's such a successful episode in that sense to have the whole second episode basically just be lead up, planning the boss battle itself, aftermath of boss battle, and it ends with a really big character moment for Kirito that explains a lot of where the show is going from here on out. And there's really important moments that happen within that scene that basically determine why this series story goes in the way it does compared to where it could have gone. So let's actually address Kirito and Asuna first, I suppose. Obviously, as I said, there's a slight kind of continuity thing, like if you're basing it off the books or the anime, what happened, like when did they meet first. But the anime just makes it clear that Kirito meets Asuna at this first floor boss raid meeting, led by Diavel. He's the leader basically of this group early on. Former beta tester, you learn by the end of the episode, and he is organizing all the top players to basically just try and beat this first boss, because as is established at the start of this episode, 1 month has passed and they've been trapped in the game. 2,000 players have died. And then you get the information, I think, from the first episode that the beta test was 2 months long, and Kirito, basically all the beta testers, the furthest they got was floor 8. So you can see that even with beta tester information, just this idea that you die in real life, if you die in the game, has slowed things down. That there are people afraid to fight the first boss, people afraid to even really do anything in the game, as some of Asuna's character kind of stuff in the episode kind of points out. But Diavel is organizing people to actually make that happen, and you can see the respect that Kirito has for this guy and the enthusiasm he adds to this group, that even though he's asking them to put their lives on the line to get to the second floor, to inspire everyone else, to show them that, look, we beat the first boss, we've opened a new floor, we can do new things now, we can get to floor 100 eventually. He's trying to inspire everyone, and Kirito respects that because it's something that he can't do. He is not that leader character, as you see throughout this episode. But Kirito can lead people in other ways. He's not the charismatic leader able to do these awesome speeches like Diavel, but he can do things in his own way. And obviously what happens here is that Asuna and Kirito are kind of left out of all the 6 people raid parties being formed, and he and Asuna are left to join into a party to make the kind of last bit of the raid group just this kind of makeshift 2-man group. And they're basically put on the duty during the fight of keep the additional enemies off us while we deal with the boss. Basically saying that, look, you're not going to be really involved much in the main boss battle. Which links into something which is a kind of side plot that the anime, this episode, only slightly hints at, but is a fairly decent part of this book, and that is that in the lead up to the actual boss battle, Diavel is constantly trying to buy Kirito's sword from him. It's established that Kirito has this very powerful early game weapon that he got from a quest, the Anil blade, and then he's upgraded it 3 times, so it's like a +3. And this is really powerful early on. It might be +4, I can't really remember. But either way, Diavel is trying to buy this from Kirito through Kibao, through an information broker in the book, for the purpose of basically taking a powerful weapon away from Kirito so he won't be able to get the last kind of strike bonus, and giving him a better chance to get it himself, as you see. The only thing that really hints towards this in the anime episode is when Diavel basically jumps in and activates his sword skill to try and get the final attack. He glances to Kirito and kind of gives him this smile, as in, like, I've got this now. But they don't really explain what that's really about. What you get just from the anime, I think, is it's a glance towards him that I'm a beta tester, I'm getting the last strike bonus here, not you. And I think the book establishes that Kirito had a bit of a reputation in the beta test for getting a lot of last strike bonuses. And so Diavel, his one slightly selfish act in this whole thing is just that as much as he was leading everyone, he also wanted to get the last strike bonus for himself. and gets himself killed in the process, because the beta was not the same as the real game, because the boss on its last health bar changed to a different weapon that Kirito realized basically seconds before he died. It was actually like a katana type weapon rather than the kind of halberd thing that I think they kind of had information about. And so he dies in Kirito's arms, and it ends up being an important thing in the episode, just Diavel's last words to Kirito, that you're a beta tester, I knew you were. Now it's up to you to basically help all of these people. And he does. He and Asuna basically, with the death of Diavel, the party's in ruins. Basically, no one knows what to do. They've lost their leader. And basically no one's fighting. And so Kirito jumps into action, Asuna jumps beside him, and the two do some decent damage, inspire the rest of them to have hope. Egil jumps in, and then everyone else jumps in, and they manage to beat the boss thanks to Kirito and Asuna, but primarily Kirito, just inspiring people. And you see kind of the idea that they're going for here is that even though Kirito doesn't have these leadership skills because he's not the best socially and stuff like that, he is one of these star players in the game and can inspire people through his skill and action. That's what he did here. He inspired Asuna to join him. He inspired everyone else to jump back into the fight. He knows tactically, I suppose, the best way to fight the bosses, but probably doesn't have the skills to really kind of bark out orders like, you go in here, you go in here. He kind of develops it a little bit as the series goes on, but it's just an interesting dynamic that they had here. This the different types of leadership that you're kind of getting throughout this thing. And that Kirito, throughout the entire series, is always going to be that character who inspires people more by what he does rather than what he says. And so he gets the final strike bonus from the boss, and this is where the big issue, the big kind of thematic part of this episode comes into play. Beta testers versus the new players. Kibao, his involvement in the episode, that he thinks that the beta testers are holding back information from the new players, and that basically the beta testers have gotten all of the new players who have died killed. Egil points out that, no, look, the beta testers supplied the guidebooks for free to new players. And then the book points out, and I suppose the anime hints towards the fact that a lot of the players who died are probably the beta testers. The book basically says that 800 of the 1,000 beta tester participants were playing Sword Art Online on the day of launch, and of that 800, 300 beta testers are like already dead within a month. That they were the ones trying to push things ahead, get stuff done early on in the game, and actually clear the game. And them trying to help everyone else got them killed. So it's one of these things where, like, yes, maybe there are a few players that are selfish, but for the most part, the beta testers were helping the other people, and it's just this whole idea that now that their lives are on the line, everything becomes an issue. And Kibao here, even after the end of the fight, basically changes things, because everyone's cheering for Kirito at the end of the fight, that he has won them this battle fundamentally. And he's just about to smile. You can see that in the animation. He's just about to kind of smile and kind of accept the praise and almost accept that leadership role properly when Kibao speaks up and says for everyone to stop cheering. He knows that Kirito is a beta tester, and basically this creates this rift that is going to create this huge problem in the game. This huge feud between the beta testers and the new players. And Kirito, at this point in time, realizes that the only way to stop this feud from happening, the only way to help everyone else in the game, is to effectively kind of sacrifice himself, make himself the villain, make himself the one member of this new group that everyone hates. And that's where the whole beater thing comes from. He basically says that, look, I was better than every beta tester. Most of the beta testers were worse players than you guys are right now. I was on a whole other level. I know so much about this game. And it works because all the anger and hate goes towards Kirito and away from all of the other beta testers, and he saves everyone. Basically, he's a beta tester in terms of just having a better time playing this game, and it's a really interesting moment that he's the one to have to do that. And he talks, I suppose, in the book and in the anime at times about how, it wasn't the hardest decision for him to make because fundamentally he was going to be a solo player ever uh, going forward. But you could see the hints at the end of this fight that he was about to kind of almost accept the role of being a leader here. He was about to help all of these people for the rest of the game until this rift with Kabao came up. So it's a really strong moment. He puts on the prize he won using his skill, his knowledge. He got the last attack bonus. He puts on the Code of Midnight, and it makes him look like the villain. At that moment, you get basically the start of Kirito, the Black Swordsman. Now, the book actually establishes, because it picks up immediately on floor 2, that actually not a lot of people know who Kirito is. It makes it sound like he's going to be vilified for the whole game, when in fact he is a relatively plain looking character, so everyone's just like, oh yeah, that beater who's the guy with the black coat. So he can actually just realistically walk through town normally once he takes the coat off. As you basically find out as the episodes progress, no one really knows straight away that Kirito is Kirito until he shows his skills in battle and stuff like that, because he's not wearing this crazy armor. Yes, his sword is usually a bit crazy, but he doesn't look anything special normally. But it's just a cool dynamic that they have going on with him, and it's an important thing going forward, just that he helped so much with the other players in making this sacrifice. And the only players then and there who knew what he was doing were Asuna and Eagle. And that's why they're his friends going forward. Speaking of Asuna, we do get a little bit of character on her in the first episode. It's something that this book covers in a lot more detail. This idea that she decided, a week or two into the game, she wasn't just going to be one of these people to just sit around crying, thinking about the real world, and just waiting in the first town. She was going to go out and try and clear this game, even if it meant dying and getting killed in this world very quickly. And so the book basically establishes that, she basically pushes herself to an insane degree to try and clear the game as quick as possible. She dives solo into the boss labyrinth of floor 1, doesn't really take much sleep, doesn't really eat all that much. And so in the book, her first meeting with Kirito is basically, he arrives, sees her attacking all these enemies in a crazy manner, with such a low margin for error, and she collapses. He saves her by pulling her out of the dungeon, but you kind of see this kind of issue that she's almost going to get herself killed here. And this idea that she's not going to let the game change who she is. She wants to have hope and stuff like that, but that she wants to get out of the game. She doesn't enjoy being in there at all. So when you get that scene between Kirito and Asuna where they're eating the bread, it's the first hint towards Asuna almost kind of learning to enjoy the world a little bit. In that Kirito can he did this quest just to get cream, and he shares it with Asuna, and she probably has nice food for the first time in the game. And maybe it's a hint towards that Kirito is the one who inspires her to develop her cooking skills, because she likes the fact that you can actually have flavors in this world, in the food. It's a very relatively minor moment in the grand scheme of their relationship, but you can see these connections that are kind of being made there. So I really do like that. Anything else really about the episode? The final, I suppose, line that kind of Kirito says to Asuna, that you can be strong. If in the future someone offers you a place in their guild, accept it. Which is obviously a setup for later on. He meets her again, and she's second in command of the Knights of the Blood Oath. And he's just like, whoa, didn't expect that. But he can see that she has the potential to be one of the strongest players in the game, and just gives her the advice that, look, you are not made to be a solo player. I am. There is only so much a solo player can accomplish, but I'm going to do what I can. And he basically recommends her not to do the same as him and leaves. Now, admittedly, the book picks up, as I said, on floor 2. They do meet up again and kind of help out in the second floor boss battle. But fundamentally, it's just this advice that he gives to her that she eventually ends up taking. And it is the thing that he has had a big impact on Asuna despite having only recently met him. But I think that's the main gist of what I want to say about this episode. There's a lot of things I wanted to cover. This will probably be one of the longer reviews I will have, just because there was so much I did want to hit on. But I'm really excited to continue this review series with episode 3. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on episode 2 and my review. Thanks for watching, and bye.